Redditors that were kicked out before or at 18, what happened to your relationship with your parents afterwards? 6 months before I was 18, my grandmother was adamant that she was going to take me to enlist in the military, and I said no, so she wanted me out at 18. I arranged to move in with my GF. By the time of moving day, my grandmother was acting like our spat never happened. Keep in touch, don't be a stranger, don't burn any bridges. I only really interacted with her at family gatherings after that, and I have her on Facebook so she can keep up to date without me actively taking to her. That gets me mad. When they see you don't need them, they realize they have no power and they're useless. It's a long, ugly story. But yes, it did change everything. I still harbor resentment toward my mom for caring more about getting my stepdad out of jail than making sure I was okay or taking me to the hospital. I'll never stop loving my mom, and I know she loved me back, but it was clear that her men sat higher on her priority list than I did. I was 16, he didn't even have a legal right to kick me out in the first place. And I obviously never trusted my stepdad again. I haven't talked to him since my mom died in 2010, and I hope I never see him again. I couldn't care less about how his life is going. I have more important things to focus on. I feel you. In this case, I just don't care about my bio father. My mom has always put men above the list when me and my sister was being physically harmed, mentally abused, etc. I was 16. We had maybe a handful of conversations over the decades since then. My mom somehow found out when I was graduating and showed up to both my high school and college graduation unexpectedly and tried to take some credit. Most of my teachers and friends laughed awkwardly at her. I didn't go to my master's graduation, so I don't know if she did. She's in hospice care, dying now, unable to move or speak or see. I call and read to her an hour a night on weekdays in an attempt to be the light I want to see in the world, but I'm incapable of sharing even the smallest bit of information about myself. Good for you. Repaying darkness with light is very difficult. My parents split when I was young enough I could not remember, and I got stuck with my mom. My dad always pushed for visitation, but my mom, being the psycho she was, wouldn't let him see me and would frequently lie to me, telling me he hated me and did not want to see me. Eventually, as I got older, I got smart enough to see through the phone calls where she would call him and then sneakily hit the receiver to hang up, then pretend to have a conversation WTH him about me. I realized at that point, probably about 14 years old, how wrong all this was and started acting out. She promised to throw me out the minute I turned 18. Constantly, conveniently when she thought she would stop receiving child support checks, I started reaching out to my dad on my own from friends' phones and making plans to move in with him when the day came. Well, the day came, and somehow or another my mother found out the age of majority in Nebraska was 19. She tried to not let me move out. My dad, being the good guy he is, offered to just keep paying for the year if I could move, and she took the deal. She got to keep the money and get me out of her hair. I lived with my dad for a few years till I had the life skills to make it on my own. I still talk and care deeply for him. Couldn't care less about my mother. Will never see or speak to her again. My one regret about all this is my younger half-siblings, both 12 plus years younger, still have to be raised with that monster, but I had to get out and save myself. Scared to ever reach out to them, because whenever I speak to my older brother, who went through a handful of shit himself with her, he always tells me I should just forgive and move on, constantly trying to keep me up to date on her. I just can't do that, so I cut them all out and just focus on my own life. When I was 16, my mom invited her alcoholic boyfriend to move in with us. He hid his drinking quite well, and he hid the violent outbursts he had towards me even better. I tried talking to my mother and grandmother about it, and they accused me of lying because I just didn't like him. The whole thing snowballed, and, because my dad wasn't talking to me or my sibling at the time, a key fell out of my pocket before I left for school, got locked out of the house for a couple hours. Apparently that was the worst thing ever and justified a massive argument and falling out. I ended up on a bus to a different city at 2 a.m. to live with a friend whose dad owned a roofing business. Spent a few months hating every second of it and trying to make it on my own. Eventually my mom's boyfriend started to go after my sibling, and it all ended when he threw a glass of water at them, glass included, in front of my mom. I was able to go back home, but things were never the same and I fell into a deep depression and it left me with some trust issues, especially with people around the age I am now. It also left me with an odd aversion to physical labor. A lot more has happened since then, despite repeated attempts to reconcile our relationships. I ultimately decided that I can't be around them, and that it's best to keep my distance from family. I talk to my parents once a year, on Boxing Day, and that's all the time and attention I'm willing to give to them. Parents divorced when I was 15, I think. Stayed with my mom. Didn't last long. Moved out with my best friend and his parents at almost 17. Spent the last year of high school with them. Moved into my aunt and uncle's house for college. Have absolutely zero contact with my mother. Just like pretty much everyone else in our family. She's honestly just a terrible person. I got out and I'm glad I did, have never looked back. 40 now. Got a great GF now of almost 7 years. Just bought a house a year ago. Dad was pretty absent, not a bad guy, just never put in much of an effort to remain in my life. Don't really talk to him anymore. Got sick of being the only one to ever reach out or make an effort. Some people just weren't meant to be parents. I feel truly terrible for kids that don't have a way out or for people to help them get out like I did. I'm truly blessed, to be honest. Was disowned by my Mormon mother for turning down an Army ROTC scholarship offer to BYU in favor of the local Gasp Catholic University that offered me a fairly decent scholarship. A quick Google of BYU student rules and their strict honor code was enough to confirm my decision. I ended up enlisting in the Army instead, and while I was gone my mom cleaned out the joint bank account and filed for divorce. I ended up paying for my dad's divorce lawyer. Throwing her crap in the moving truck was the last time I ever saw her. It's been almost 15 years and I haven't seen her since. Good riddance. My stepdad mother kicked me out when I was 18. It wasn't that they kicked me out that I couldn't forgive. I'd been a bit of a shit at times, though nothing serious, but their reasons why. To make a long story short, they just stopped showing me any trust without having a reason to. Forcing me to show them my homework, when I'm bringing in good grades, actually I shit you not, checking my garbage at least once a week. I'm not sure WTF they were expecting to find, but no drugs, condoms or whatever in there. Then finally one of them downloading some nasty porn on the home PC and blaming it on me. Never used that PC, wasn't into gaming or anything back then. Did my HW at the school library if I needed to type stuff up. Wouldn't know where to go or how to download it, and finally F***ing not into bodily fluids. That treatment I've never forgiven. As for my father, he was an abusive drunk, who would blame me if work went poorly, or he lost a contact lens. He took me in after I was kicked out, treated me like crap. I had enough and left. Ended up enlisting and it did me a lot of good. My father took it hard and to heart and actually worked to make himself a better person. He stopped drinking and went to a counselor. I didn't see him again until some time later. It was rough at first, but now he feels like an actual father. So, Dr. forgave the parent that tried to make things better, but never forgave the rest. I was 17 when my mom and I had a huge fight. She said, "If you walk out the door, don't bother coming back," one of those empty threats. Of course she was surprised when I packed some bags and took off. I stayed with a guy that I had been seeing for a couple of months. That relationship fizzled out fast and I wound up coming back home. Learned fast that he was a drug user. He was also staying at his brother's house and said it was cool that I was there. But then the brother announced he was coming home, and that was it for me. Took a long time to patch things up with my mom. We started getting along better later in my life. It took a long time to get there though. My dad and I always got along well. Moved out at 16, had to move back at 17, got kicked out again at 18. Went no contact, then low contact, and since then it's ping-ponged between low contact and regular contact. The only reason I left no contact was because my grandparents begged me to, and they are good people. Our relationship didn't truly get better until a few years ago. It basically took them having issues and having to ask me for help/advice, and admitting to themselves that they don't always know better.